Another thing that I'll show is my compost bins. Um, Compost, I mean, probably the most important thing to a garden, really. The most beneficial thing you can do is add compost to your soil. It does a couple things. It makes the soil more workable, more aerated. It holds moisture well, but it doesn't hold too much. There's so many benefits. The beneficial bacteria. I mean, there's so much. I don't think you can do anything better than compost for a garden. And I want to show what I'm using now. I'm using these geo bins. And the reason I'm using these is because I went with this choice is because they're just the right size. They're 3-foot diameter by roughly 3 foot tall. And people have determined, it's been determined that that's the ideal size for a compost pile if you're really trying to make, you want a compost factory that works well and fast and effective. 3 cubic foot pile is the ideal size. Plus, there's tons of aeration, as you saw. On YouTube, there is a sort of a test that some guys did, and I'll post the links to those videos down below. It's about a 4 or 5 part video series, and these guys took every type of compost bin they could get a hold of: tumblers, bins, the little compost stands, the compost factory, the compost this. I think they even did just piles. They did homemade things, but they took all these compost methods. They mixed up the same stuff in each one. They turned each one the same. Of course, each one was under the same weather conditions and all that stuff. And to see what worked better, what worked the best. The geo bins came out way, I mean, they won out. They came out way ahead, and which was kind of surprising because it's not a tumbler. It's a static bin, but it's the right size, the right aeration, and it worked great. And they judged the final compost on the quality of the compost, the speed of the compost, and I think they actually looked at the compost scientifically to see, what came out the best. The geo bins work the greatest. They're made by Presto. They're about 30 bucks a piece or something, 25, I don't know, with shipping and all. But I mean, when you're making your own compost in that quantity, it pays for itself the first time you use them. There's no comparison to the stuff you buy in the stores. When you go to Lowe's and Home Depot, you get, worm compost and manure compost, black cow, and, well, the disadvantage of that stuff is that there's not a lot in it. It's only like a few ingredients to make that compost. Yeah, it's beneficial to your soil as far as making it friable and absorb water, and there's benefits to it still. It's not a useless product. It's actually very beneficial, but you're not going to get the beneficial bacteria and all that out of that stuff really in most cases, because they got the stuff sitting out there in bags sealed off out in the sun, and it's cooking, and it pretty well kills anything that's in it as far as bacteria goes. I mean, if you do go to Lowe's, Home Depot, and pick up some compost, at least get some stuff that's not been sitting out in the sun, because it's pretty well killed anything in it. It's microwaved. So that's another thing to keep in mind. If you're, I know people want to put compost, they can't make compost, they're buying compost. Just try to get the best stuff you can that's got the most variety in it, and that's not sitting out in the sun cooking in the parking lot. You're losing, you're kind of wasting some money there by doing that. And another thing is the variety. You can't beat homemade compost because you're able to put so much different things into it. Everything ingredient you put in your compost creates a different type of bacteria, a different type of beneficial bacteria. And so the more varied, the more variety in that compost, the more effective it's going to be for your whole garden. Versus it's just mushroom compost. It's hay, straw, some soil, and another couple ingredients. you're going to have a much better compost by making your own, where you can throw in all your food scraps, your egg shells, your paper, your coffee grinds, your you know, throw some wood ash off in there. There's other things I'll show later that you can put in there that are very beneficial. And so that's kind of that's the benefit of making your own compost. But hey, if all else fails, any compost is good, because at the least it's going to provide a texture and whatnot to that soil. It's going to be beneficial, and it's not all is lost. I'm not saying don't buy a compost at a store. I'm just saying it's not going to be as beneficial as you might think as far as your bacteria and all those things. So that's the compost thing. I covered that. Okay, a quick few more things that I'll bring up. Just opinions. I'll get them out of the way. One obviously is water. When you water if you got raised beds, potted plants, whatnot, try to avoid as best you can of using the water directly out of the spigot. I know it depends on your region and whatnot, but for example here, there's a lot of chlorine in our water. Chlorine kills bacteria. That's not good for your soil. And if you, I mean, imagine that you're watering every day, every other day, a couple times a week. It builds up in your soil, and it's not helpful at all. What I do to combat that is I fill containers with water and I let them sit for a day or two before I water. And so that's an easy way to combat that situation. Let's think. I mentioned the Grand Moss thing, the Epsom salts. And I'll have to say, I mean, Epsom salts is magnesium, and plants need magnesium. But the real benefit of magnesium, obviously, is that it helps the soil break the calcium into something the plant takes up. That's going to really help with your blossom end rot on tomatoes and peppers and things like that, cucumbers. That's a big deal to a lot of people, and I still get it. And even no matter how careful you are about all that, a lot of times some plants, just the first few, get that no matter what. But don't worry, you know, as long as you have calcium available to that plant, it'll help. And you keep it watered regularly. Not too watered, and then dry it out and watered. That change in the watering cycle doesn't help it any. It doesn't help it take up calcium. Whoa. That's why it's helpful to plant your roots as deep as possible. The other thing is eggshells. A lot of people say calcium from eggshells. That's a good thing. I've done that. I do it almost every year. I save eggshells. I grind them up into something a little more powdery, and I put them in the ground. The only thing I'll say about eggshells is be careful. If you're talking about raw egg shells, throw them in the microwave before you grind them up and put them in your garden. Remember several years ago there was the big tomato salmonella situation going on? Enough said. If you're saving shells from raw eggs, microwave them. Microwave them for a while. Kill anything that might be. Just be safe. Just be safe. Another thing is hydrogen peroxide. I know a lot of people, you know, they'll say pour that in around your plants. It's helpful. Hydrogen peroxide, from what I understand now, it's basically liquid oxygen, and so it's beneficial, but it evaporates very quickly. So it's probably not beneficial to put pour some hydrogen peroxide in a jug of water and then water your plants. I mean, that stuff's evaporating so fast, it's unreal. So if you do use hydrogen peroxide, I mean, mix it and pour it, and it's maybe beneficial that way. and on that subject, rain. I mean, everybody knows that after a good rain in the summertime, the spring, you'll notice that your plants just take off and really get crazy. It's not the fact that the plants got so much rain. It's the fact that when it rains good, it pulls oxygen down into the soil. It's pushing oxygen into the soil, so to speak. That is what makes that big difference, you know. Believe it or not, roots, plants, they need some oxygen in that soil. That's why it's so important to have a light aerated type soil. Um, you know, and that's why plants benefit so much from when it rains. It's not so much because of the rain, it's because of the oxygen that rain contains and that it's pushing into the soil. And I swear to God, everybody and their brother decided to mow the yard as soon as I started filming. But anyway, just some more opinions, more things. I'm not a master gardener. I mean, if I'm wrong or I'm giving bad information, please post below, and I will do more research on it. But it's just, I think these are things that I find interesting and things that I've kind of picked up on, and I'm just passing it along. You know, there's a lot of wives' tales and whatnot, and I have just learned more about those things. Some of them, or gained a little more information as to why that actually works and whatnot. And I'll keep passing this stuff on as I go. Take it or leave it, but keep it in the back of your mind, and be safe. Most important, stay clean. Keep your hands clean in your garden. Keep your tools clean, and aeration in your soil is very important. Never use potting soil in your potted plants. Use the most drainable, fluffy stuff you can find. You know, a quick way to tell a good potting soil, when you go out shopping for soil or potting mix, everybody, terms are interchangeable, is the weight of the bag. The lighter the bag, the better. You know, if you've got 4 or 5 bags of things that you're thinking of buying and putting in your pot or whatever, get the one that's the lightest, that weighs the least. If it's heavy and you got to get your husband to carry it and whatnot, that's not something you want to put in your pots. It'll turn to concrete. It'll girdle, it'll strangle your roots. Trust me, been there, done that. In fact, I got videos that show that somewhere early on. A soilless mix is always the best way to go. But in addition to that, you're going to have to water a lot more, and you're going to have to fertilize a lot more. So, yeah, learn from me, man. This is all from mistakes, from what I've learned, what works for me, what don't. I'm just going to pass it along. Anyway, we got a long way to go, and I'll talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.